Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions, and today's opinions will be about Pax by Sara Pennypacker. So I picked this up thinking this would be a quick, light read to fill the gap while I was waiting for the last of the books of the Raksura to arrive, and it was quick, but this book is impressively heavy for a middle grade read. Pax is the story of a fox and his boy, Peter. Peter's father's going off to war, and because his mother is dead, that means Peter is going to have to live with his grandfather for now. His father tells him that he will not be able to keep his pet fox at his grandfather's, and so it is his duty to release this animal out into the wild. Pax, who has never hunted for himself, never had to defend himself, has never lived as a wild creature at all, suddenly finds himself abandoned far from home. He knows he just needs to wait until his boy comes to find him. And he's not entirely wrong. As soon as Peter is left at his grandfather's, he realizes his father was wrong. And his duty is actually to protect the creature he has raised from a baby, and who has never known anything but the life of domestication. Peter sets out to hike the 300 miles to find his pet, while Pax tries to learn how to survive like a wild fox. So this book is about half from an animal's point of view. It's about a 12-year-old boy and his pet. The boy likes playing baseball, the fox likes peanut butter. Everything about this book screams, I am for young readers. But what I forgot when I picked it up is that middle grade does not inherently equal light. This is a deeply philosophical book, covering immensely serious topics, and it really does not pull its punches. It remains appropriate for its target age range, around 8 to 12, but it is the kind of book that is going to ask those kids to seriously think and explore some difficult emotions. This book addresses patterns of abuse and generational trauma, the deeper cost of war, dehumanization, transcendence of the self, and how we use stories to shape our identity. And I think that it does an impressive job of exploring most of these themes. One of the themes I think it does the best is addressing the two ways a person's identity can be subsumed. We meet a woman named Vola who has had her complete sense of self destroyed by her time in the military. She has literally spent 20 years trying to relearn who she is. And yes, it is a well-known fact that a big part of basic training is breaking down a recruit's self so that they can become part of a greater whole. Vola walked away from the military not even remembering what she likes to eat. It's horrifying and painful, and it mirrors the way that Peter has lost parts of himself through trauma. Peter is dealing with a deep fear of his own anger because his father is a very angry man, and while it's never directly stated that he hits his son, Peter's reactions to his dad makes it pretty clear that the man is abusive. And it's directly stated that Peter's father is like this partially because Peter's grandfather was the same. So Peter is terrified that his family history of violence and anger is more powerful than his personal sense of self. That he is going to be subsumed by this generational trauma rather than stay his own person. But the other side of that subsumption is self-transcendence. Peter's a character who has a huge amount of empathy, so much so that he feels like he can feel what is happening with Pax miles and miles away. And because we see Pax's point of view, we also know that, yeah, he's accurate. He is seeing what's happening with Pax. And Vola, who is herself obsessed with a connection to the man she killed in war, explains to him the basic idea of two creatures sharing enough of a connection that they become one, and basically of people being able to reach out from themselves and become part of a greater whole. And it's a really interesting contrast of the two kinds of way that one can become part of a whole. One positive and generative way, and the other destructive. One caused by love and the other by trauma. And I love the fact that this book actually plays with such complex ideas of connection, identity, and trauma. And I do have to say that this book really does not pull its punches when it comes to trauma. There is on-page animal death, discussions and memory of human death, some pretty violent injuries, and our attention as readers are drawn to things that many war stories gloss over. There's a heart-wrenching moment where Peter comes across a spot where he played years before. And even though the war isn't even really there yet, At least the fighting hasn't come to this area. Just the laying of trenches and mines has completely destroyed this spot he grew up in. The glass-clear water of the river has been muddied, the trees destroyed, the creatures killed off. And I really like this in a book. Because, yeah, I've seen it done in movies and TV shows, but it's too easy in a visual media for the destruction to just fall into the background. For you to stop seeing it the same way that I stopped seeing a box I should have thrown out 2 weeks ago. But in a book, no, we are forced to see it. Our attention is drawn to it over and over again. Every time the author wants to draw our attention there, they can. And when the author chooses to draw attention to it in this book, is an absolute masterstroke. She does a great job of tying these scenes of destruction to the characters we have grown attached to, which gives it all this huge emotional gut punch of feeling. I will admit that is one of the moments in this book that I cried. I also think this book does an absolutely fabulous job of balancing the weight on the young protagonist's shoulders and the fact that he is a child. Middle grade books, like all media made for kids, are going to have young protagonists. Traditionally, the protagonists of middle grade books are a year or two older than the targeted readers. And if you want a protagonist to be interesting, they need to have agency, which often means putting the teenage and child protagonists in a position that they have to deal with a hell of a lot more responsibility than we would want to give to real kids. But at the same time, it all needs to be believable. There needs to be a reason the child is the one responsible for this quest, why the child is left alone to deal with these things, and why there isn't an adult telling them what to do. And also, frankly, the child needs to be an accurate level of competent. It's a rare book that hits the balance of giving the kids agency without setting off the BS meter. In this book, Peter runs off on a 300-mile hike by himself, and multiple adult characters let him go on his way by himself. As an adult reading this, yeah, there was a voice in the back of my head saying, no, you would not let that boy go back out there by himself. You would stop him. But there's enough of an explanation that I could accept it. And what I absolutely loved about this balance is that Peter has some skills, knows what he's doing in some ways, and in others, he's an absolute mess. He misses really obvious things. He acts on emotion without thinking. He clearly has not just planned the basic idea of what he is doing. He acts like a child, which he is. I like the fact that this is a child that the young readers can aspire to be without giving them the incorrect impression that they are ready to take care of themselves in the wild, or that they should be. But my favorite thing is that this book does, in my opinion, the best job I've ever read of writing an animal's point of view. To me, this is the perfect amount of personification. Pax's thoughts are translated into human language, but it feels like a translation. The writing is a hair more simple, more emotive, and with a much heavier focus on setting and physical action than internal monologue or internal thoughts when we are in his point of view. The animal characters can communicate, and it comes across as almost like telepathy, but there's just enough description that I can assume that their words are translations of body language or even animal calls. It gives a feeling of everything being softly magic. It feels childish in the best ways, and playful. And also, as mentioned, it is highly emotional. And I mean, that's what animals in books are almost always there for. They represent emotional lodestones. They represent innocence, freedom, and instinct. So this style of writing works perfectly for that. And on the note of soft implications, this book also has what I think of as a soft setting. It may be America, it may not. It could be in Europe, it could not. For a while, I honestly thought it might be Russia, but I'm pretty sure that no, it's not Russia. We know that Vola has an accent that is faintly foreign, and we make it through the majority of the book before we learn what her heritage actually is. There is a land war going on, but we never hear the name of either the homeland nor the enemy. We know things like baseball is a common sport. There are suburbs and wide open country. It is somewhere, but never stated where. Same with when the book is set. There are phones, but there don't seem to be cell phones. There are cars, there's baseball, there are tractors and buses, there is an infantry-based war with mines and trenches. I don't remember any mentions of computers, but there is TV. It is taking place sometime between the 1950s and the 1990s, but I cannot be more specific than that. And I personally love this kind of setting for children's media. It makes the story feel something like a fairy tale. It allows for a familiarity, a feeling of nostalgia, but also a separation. I like these kinds of settings for the same reason that I like fantasy. It allows us to feel connected to a story while still giving us the distance to see a broader perspective. All that being said, I am not 100% happy with the ending of this book. I feel like the abusive father angle really has not been dealt with here. We get a hug, but no information as to what's going to happen in their relationship after this point. We get a lot more movement in how it affects Peter's feelings of himself. So the interior arc progresses really well, but the exterior part of the arc has no progress whatsoever. And I mean, there is a sequel, and I'm guessing that all of that is going to be addressed in that sequel, but I would have preferred Peter to either not see his father at all in the latter half of this book, or have at least enough interaction to tell us where we are going. It made the ending feel abrupt and incomplete. The other part of the ending I didn't really like is a personal preference thing, and also I cannot discuss it without minor spoilers. So if this book sounds like one you want to read, I would suggest stopping here. I'm about to spoil the ending. But not majorly, just minorly. Okay? So we end with a bit of the classic, the wild animal must be returned to the wild narrative. And I feel like that's really overdone and almost always oversimplified. Even in this book, it's acknowledged that Pax has never lived in the wild. He doesn't know how to hunt, how to find water, what dangers to look out for. He cannot survive on his own. In the real world, animals that have been fully raised by humans generally cannot be released into the wild. They won't survive. They also might be carrying diseases that are common in domesticated animals, but not in wild populations. So releasing them can have a seriously negative impact on the wild populations. That's why it's bad to take an animal from the wild in the first place. It is a lifetime commitment. And not every animal can thrive in captivity. There's a reason we never domesticated zebras. Great white sharks kill themselves if you try to keep them in an aquarium. Elephants need about 10 times the amount of space most zoos can offer them. Even in this book, we see Pax scratching his paws raw from anxiety from being caged. Though I'd point out that, at least in this book, that clearly had more to do with how the animal was being kept than that it was being kept. But there's a reason there are a lot of people out there who just oversimplify things to release all wild animals into the wild. And I feel like this book wants to have things both ways. It was wrong for Pax to be abandoned in the woods, and we see how horrible it is for him and how close he comes to dying multiple times. But it was also somehow right for Peter to leave him in the wild in the end? And I mean, yeah, we as readers have seen him make friends, find a family, learn how to live like a fox. But Peter hasn't seen that. Peter just sees him with other foxes and go, cool, I guess he belongs here now. And I'm like, one of those foxes is missing a leg. You should probably take them back to Volo where they can live like her raccoon, free to come and go, but still being taken care of. There are other options than just saying, okay, bye now. And I know that some of my reaction to this ending is just coming from the small child still alive in me that desperately wanted a pet fox and is now going, no, you had a fox, keep him! But more than that, it would be logical for him to at least try to find the foxes somewhere safer to be. And it sort of undermines Peter's entire journey to have him finally find Pax and just go, okay, he's happy where he is. I mean, he wouldn't have survived the last 10 pages of the book without the sudden appearance of his humans, but that's fine. I should let him go now. It would be like if Frodo and Sam got all the way to Mount Doom and decided that instead of dropping the ring in the lava, they were going to just hand it off to Sauron because he seems to really want it, and the book implies, yeah, that's correct. And once again, all of this might be remedied in the sequel. I don't know. I haven't read it. But this one also feels enough like a standalone that I would not feel right about reviewing it with the assumption that the sequel will fix all my qualms. Now, I still absolutely love this book, but the ending just slightly tarnished my enjoyment of it. Other than that, it was great. It was a powerful, emotional, thoughtful book. I loved it. I cried dozens of times. Not dozens. I cried like 3 times. This book has some powerful lines, deep concepts presented in a way that children should be able to digest them, and has a heart of gold. I would definitely recommend it to any child who is ready for a good cry, and who is ready to work through some trauma. Also, it has foxes. So yeah, I liked it. I would have just liked a different ending slightly better.